Hi, everyone. Welcome to this second inquiry video in the PEPSA inquiry video series. These have been created just for you to help you through the inquiry process as a PEPSA participant. Once again, my name is Nancy Fichtman-Dana, and I'm just delighted to be introducing you to the process of inquiry and teaching you about some of the finer points of the process. So without any further ado, let's get to one of those finer points in today's video. And to do so, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Like I did in the first video, I created some PowerPoint slides for you to take us through the second topic. And that topic is developing a wondering. I want to begin this video, though, with just a very brief review of what we covered in the introduction to inquiry video. So we began with a very simple definition of the inquiry process and defined that as systematic, intentional study by teachers of their own practice. And then what I did is I shared with you and defined 5 different components of the inquiry process. And those included developing a wondering, collecting data, analyzing data, taking action, and sharing with others. And then, of course, it's always good to see what something looks like in practice. So in our last video, we looked at one example of teacher inquiry, and that was the example of Debbie Hubble. And by going through that example, you were able to see how each one of those 5 components translated into a real live inquiry cycle through the work of Debbie. If you remember, when we ended that example, I shared with you Debbie's actual words, and that began with, teacher inquiry has become not something I do, but more a part of the way I think. And that's where I want to start us off in this video, that idea of inquiry being a way that you think. If you think back to the first video, I alluded to this in the definition part of that video when we were defining what inquiry is. And before I taught you about those 5 components, components that you are going to journey through in your PEPSA inquiry experience, I said, it's really first and foremost important to realize that inquiry, more than anything else, is a way of being. And that being includes 3 things. Problematizing practice, because teaching is just a really complex act. And because it's so complex, it's natural and normal for us to have problems emerge. So we celebrate those problems by naming them through the inquiry process and systematically studying them, and then taking action based on what we've learned so that we can become the very best teachers that we could be. So before we move on to today's topic on developing a wondering, formalizing the questions that enter your mind as you teach, that's what today's topic of our video is. I wanted to introduce you to yet one more example in addition to Debbie. And I really love this example. This is a teacher. Her name is Stephanie Whitaker. And I love this example because it really encapsulates that notion of inquiry being a way of being and just how you approach your practice. And one of the things you'll learn in this particular video is sometimes inquiry is used by teachers to gain insights into either a single learner or a particular group of learners that may be puzzling to them in some way or have particular needs that really ask for teachers to take this inquiry approach to working with them. And that's what you're going to be doing in PEPSA, right? You are going to be using the inquiry process to better understand your work with students with autism. And so in this example, you're going to meet Stephanie Whitaker. And like you, she works with a particular group of students. She works with ESOL students. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this particular example of teacher inquiry. I want to actually take you to Stephanie's classroom, however, so you can see her in action, you can see her with the students that she teaches, and you can see her approach to teaching them, which is an inquiry approach or an inquiry stance. It's her way of being. So, in order to go on this field trip, you're going to have to do a couple of things. The first thing you're going to have to do in a minute, when I'm done explaining, not quite yet, is pause this video of me sharing with you about wondering development and open up a new window after you pause in your browser. And you're going to type into that window tinyurl.com/inquiry example. And then just click on that link and it's going to take you on that field trip to Stephanie's classroom so you can actually see her and her students in action and have another example of inquiry to complement and enhance the example that we looked at last time of Debbie Hubble's. All right, are you ready for the field trip? So pause this video now. Go ahead and type in this URL and watch that video on your field trip, and then come on back when you're done, and I will meet you back right here in this video to move on and acknowledge that example and talk a little bit more about the topic of today's inquiry video, which is developing a wondering. Okay, see you back here soon. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed visiting Stephanie Whitaker and seeing her in action, both how she teaches and inquires into teaching, and how those two things are seamlessly intertwined with one another. And once again, that is really what inquiry is about. And that's what's so exciting about this PEPSA program is approaching your work with students with autism from an inquiry stance, this way of being where you're always going to be curious about the work that you're doing with students with autism, and you're going to celebrate passions that come up for you, problems of practice that emerge in your work by developing a question that you would like to study in order to gain insights into. And then once you do study it and you learn from it, you can pour that learning back into your work with students with autism, truly becoming the very best that you can be with and for every student with autism that you work with. So it's really exciting. And where it all begins is with that question, the question that you develop. So that's what we're going to cover in today's video. And as a reminder, this is what a wondering is. It's a burning question that you have about your practice. And once again, it emerges at the nexus of two places. The work we do as teachers is inherently incredibly complex. And because of that, we experience felt difficulties and real world dilemmas on a regular basis. And actually, that's something that is so exciting and wonderful about teaching is this notion of problem solving, understanding, being curious. And again, that's what inquiry is all about. And what better way to be curious about something than to pose a question about it? And so that's where your questions emerge at the nexus of the complexity of the work you do and your felt difficulties and real world dilemmas. So you have already seen a couple examples of what wonderings look like. In the little field trip that you took when you visited Stephanie Whitaker's classroom, you learned that her question was it's just sort of very broad. She posed the question to guide her inquiry. How can I help my students improve mathematics to become master learners? So there's a very broad, general, kind of sweeping question. And it was a good match for Stephanie because she was really interested in developing this way of being in her teaching as an inquirer. So that worked great for her. And then you also saw the example in the last video of Debbie Hubble, and her question was, what is the relationship between my fourth grader's fluency development and the reading of fractured fairy tale plays? So keep this in mind. You've already seen two examples of what a question or a wondering can look like as we move forward in today's video.